the silent sky. Our plane vanished, leaving behind only questions and fear. In the vast skies above Southeast Asia, a modern marvel of aviation vanished into nothingness. On March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 departed from Kuala Lumpur, bound for Beijing. On board were 239 souls, men, women, children, businessmen, tourists, and crew. But less than an hour after takeoff, the aircraft slipped from the radar screens. And into legend, it wasn't just a crash, it wasn't just a tragedy. What unfolded was one of the greatest mysteries in modern history, an enigma that sparked international search efforts, endless speculation, and countless unanswered questions. How could a Boeing 777, one of the safest and most advanced aircraft ever built, simply disappear? This is the story of Flight MH370, a story of confusion, desperation, grief, and theories that range from the scientific to the unthinkable. It was just after midnight, in the early hours of March 8, 2014. Kuala Lumpur International Airport bustled with activity, but for the passengers of MH370, the journey ahead was nothing unusual. Scheduled as a red-eye flight, it was set to depart at 12:41 a.m. and arrive in Beijing at 6:30 a.m. local time. The aircraft, a Boeing 777-200ER, was among the most reliable in service. This wasn't some outdated machine prone to failure. It was a state-of-the-art jet, capable of flying more than 7,000 nautical miles without refueling. The captain for the flight, Zahari Ahmad Shah, was a seasoned pilot with over 18,000 hours of flying experience. The first officer, Farik Abdul Hamid, was younger, but well-trained and nearing the completion of his certification to fly the Boeing 777. Together, they formed what should have been a perfectly capable cockpit crew. Inside the cabin, 227 passengers prepared for the overnight journey. They came from 14 different nations. The majority, 153, were from China. There were 38 Malaysians, and others from Indonesia, Australia, India, France, the United States, and more. Families with children, couples traveling for leisure, and business professionals all settled into their seats. The mood inside the aircraft was calm. Flight attendants went through their routines, performing safety checks and preparing for the quiet, uneventful flight ahead. Outside, the weather was clear. The takeoff went smoothly. At 12:41 a.m., MH370 lifted off the runway and climbed into the night sky, banking northeast toward the South China Sea. For the first 40 minutes, everything was normal. Air traffic control in Kuala Lumpur guided the flight, and routine communications were exchanged. At 1:19 a.m., as MH370 prepared to pass from Malaysian airspace into Vietnamese airspace, a calm voice was heard over the radio. It was believed to be First Officer Hamid. He spoke a simple phrase, "Good night, Malaysian 370. These were the last known words transmitted from the plane. Moments later, the aircraft's transponder, the device that sends identification signals to air traffic controllers, stopped transmitting. MH370 disappeared from civilian radar. What should have been a routine 6-hour flight to Beijing had just slipped into mystery. When the transponder of flight MH370 went silent at 1:21 a.m., air traffic controllers in Kuala Lumpur assumed there was nothing unusual. Aircraft sometimes experience technical glitches. Maybe the transponder had malfunctioned. Maybe the pilots would quickly reset it. But as minutes ticked by, unease began to grow. The handoff to Ho Chi Minh City's air traffic control had failed. Vietnamese controllers waited for MH370's signal, but it never arrived. Repeated radio calls went unanswered. The plane had vanished from civilian radar. What no one realized in that moment was that MH370 had not vanished completely. Military radar in Malaysia, separate from civilian systems, still tracked the aircraft. What the radar revealed would spark even more questions. Instead of continuing on its path toward Beijing, MH370 made a sharp turn westward, back across the Malay Peninsula. The plane flew over the Gulf of Thailand, then cut across northern Malaysia. It climbed to an unusual altitude. Reports suggest as high as 45,000 feet, before descending again. These maneuvers were not random. They appeared deliberate. At 2:22 a.m., the plane disappeared from Malaysian military radar as it crossed the Strait of Malacca. For the outside world, MH370 had simply ceased to exist. Families expecting loved ones in Beijing that morning would wait in vain. But in the background, one final electronic lifeline still pulsed. The aircraft's satellite communication system, known as SATCOM, continued to send hourly handshakes to an orbiting Inmarsat satellite. These were not messages or coordinates, but simple pings, acknowledgements that the aircraft was still powered and connected. The last of these handshakes came at 8:19 a.m., nearly 7 hours after takeoff. By then, the plane was far from its intended course, somewhere over the remote southern Indian Ocean. Not a single distress call had been made. No emergency signals were activated. For the families, for the aviation world, for governments around the globe, this was the most unsettling detail of all. A Boeing 777 cannot simply vanish. It cannot fly for hours silently, without a word from its crew. And yet that is exactly what MH370 seemed to have done. When news broke that Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 had disappeared, the world reacted with disbelief. How could a modern Boeing 777, equipped with advanced navigation and safety systems, simply vanish from the sky? The first hours of the search were filled with confusion. Malaysian officials initially focused efforts in the South China Sea, along the plane's intended flight path toward Beijing. Dozens of ships and aircraft from neighboring countries joined the mission. They scanned the waters for debris, life rafts, or any sign of wreckage, but nothing appeared. Not a single floating suitcase, not an oil slick, not even a scrap of metal. The sea was silent, as if MH370 had never flown that route at all. Then came the revelation that changed everything. The Malaysian military had tracked the plane westward, away from its planned course. Suddenly, the search area shifted thousands of miles. Crews redirected their efforts toward the Strait of Malacca and the Andaman Sea. Yet once again, the ocean offered no answers. No wreckage, no distress signals, only silence. Meanwhile, investigators turned to the faint satellite handshakes detected by Inmarsat. Analysts noticed a pattern. The pings indicated MH370 was still airborne for hours after losing contact. Using complex mathematical models, they traced two possible corridors. One stretched north across Asia toward Kazakhstan. The other plunged south into the desolate expanse of the Indian Ocean. The northern corridor seemed impossible. Not a single radar station across multiple countries had reported detecting MH370. That left the southern corridor, the most remote, unforgiving ocean on Earth, a place where storms raged, waves towered, and depths plunged deeper than Mount Everest is tall. As days turned to weeks, hope began to fade. Families of the 239 people on board gathered in hotels in Beijing and Kuala Lumpur, desperate for answers. Every briefing was the same. No confirmed wreckage, no confirmed signals, no certainty. Rumors spread like wildfire. Hijacking, terrorism, secret military operations. But officials had no evidence, only theories. The disappearance of MH370 was quickly becoming more than a tragedy. It was turning into one of the greatest mysteries of modern aviation. As weeks turned into months with no sign of MH370, the world's attention shifted from search efforts to speculation. If the plane didn't simply crash along its intended route, then what happened? Some investigators pointed to the pilots. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a veteran aviator with thousands of flying hours, suddenly became a figure of intense scrutiny. Did he intentionally divert the plane? Was this a carefully planned act of sabotage or even a suicide mission? Reports surfaced that Zahari had a flight simulator at home. Analysts discovered routes on the simulator similar to the southern Indian Ocean path, but nothing proved he intended harm. For many, the idea that a respected pilot would doom his passengers felt unthinkable. Others suspected mechanical failure. Could an electrical fire or decompression have disabled communications and left the crew incapacitated? In such a scenario, the plane might have flown on autopilot until fuel exhaustion brought it down into the sea. But critics argued that even a catastrophic failure should have left some trace. Distress signals, floating debris, or signs on radar. None were found. Then came the hijacking theory. Some believed armed passengers or terrorists had seized control, rerouting MH370 for an unknown purpose. Yet no group ever claimed responsibility, and no demands were made. Terrorists usually seek attention, not silence. Still, the idea persisted, fueled by the mystery of the plane's disappearance from civilian radar. More unsettling theories emerged. Could MH370 have been secretly shot down by mistake? Some pointed fingers at military forces in the region. Others whispered of a cover-up, suggesting officials knew more than they revealed. These claims were never substantiated, but the lack of evidence only deepened suspicion. The most bizarre speculations pushed the boundaries of imagination: alien abduction, time warps, even theories that the plane had been transported to another dimension. While outlandish, these ideas gained traction online, a reflection of humanity's desperation for answers in the face of silence. Meanwhile, families of the victims clung to hope. Without wreckage, without bodies, there was no closure. Mothers believed their children might still be alive. Spouses imagined their partners stranded on an island, waiting to be rescued. Grief mingled with uncertainty, creating wounds that time could not heal. The disappearance of MH370 was no longer just an aviation mystery. It had become a mirror of human psychology, our fear of the unknown, our need for answers, and our endless drive to explain the inexplicable. By April 2014, the evidence pointed decisively toward the southern Indian Ocean. Satellite data showed that MH370's final pings aligned with a lonely stretch of water far from any landmass. It was a place so remote that few ships passed through, where waves rose like mountains and the ocean floor was largely unmapped. The search quickly became the most ambitious and expensive in aviation history. Dozens of nations joined forces, Australia, Malaysia, China, and the United States among them. Ships equipped with advanced sonar systems were dispatched. Aircraft scoured the surface, while satellites orbited overhead, analyzing every pixel of the waves below. At first, there was hope. Satellite images revealed what looked like possible debris fields. Ships rushed to the locations, but when they arrived, they found only ocean garbage, floating containers, fishing gear, or nothing at all. Each false lead drained resources and morale. The search zone, initially vast, was narrowed down using mathematical models of how the plane might have flown until fuel exhaustion. Specialists believed MH370 must have plunged into the ocean somewhere west of Perth, Australia. Search teams dragged sonar equipment across the seabed, mapping previously uncharted terrain. They discovered underwater mountains, trenches, and even shipwrecks from centuries past. But of MH370 there was no sign. Months stretched into years. The cost rose into the billions. Ships mapped an area larger than the entire landmass of the United Kingdom. Yet the ocean remained silent. Families grew frustrated, accusing governments of incompetence or cover-ups. Each failed expedition felt like a fresh wound. Then, in 2015, a breakthrough. A fragment of a wing, identified as a flaperon, washed ashore on Réunion Island in the western Indian Ocean, thousands of miles from the search zone. Soon after, more debris appeared on the shores of Mozambique, Madagascar, and Tanzania. Investigators confirmed that these fragments belonged to MH370. The discovery proved the plane had crashed into the Indian Ocean, but it raised more questions than answers. How could debris travel so far from the suspected crash site? Had the search teams been looking in the wrong place all along? The ocean's currents, unpredictable and vast, only deepened the uncertainty. Despite these finds, the bulk of the plane and the remains of the 239 souls on board remained hidden beneath the waves. By 2018, after scouring more than 120,000 square kilometers of seabed, officials suspended the search. The official reason: lack of new evidence. The hunt had become too costly, too uncertain. Yet for many, the decision felt like a betrayal. Families demanded the search continue. Pilots insisted the truth must be found to prevent another tragedy. The world was left with fragments of a plane and fragments of truth, but no closure. The ocean had swallowed MH370 whole, and even with humanity's most advanced technology, the mystery remained unsolved. Behind every headline, every satellite ping, every theory, there were human lives forever altered by the disappearance of MH370. 239 passengers and crew were aboard that plane, each with a story, each with loved ones waiting at home. In Beijing, families gathered in hotels, clinging to each update from Malaysian Airlines officials. Days turned into weeks, yet the announcements brought no clarity. Instead, they were met with vague statements, shifting theories, and constant delays. Many relatives grew angry. They accused the authorities of hiding the truth, of withholding vital information. Some staged protests, holding signs that demanded, "Tell us the real story." In Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, the scene was similar. Families were trapped in a limbo of grief, unable to mourn properly without answers. A mother who lost her son later said, "Without his body, I cannot believe he is gone. I wake every morning hoping this is just a nightmare." The media seized upon the mystery, turning it into a global obsession. Every news channel from CNN to the BBC ran nightly specials. Headlines screamed of the plane that vanished and the greatest mystery in aviation history. Experts filled studios, each offering theories, some scientific, others sensational. The tragedy became entertainment for millions watching from afar, even as families lived it as a daily agony. The global aviation industry also felt the impact. Airlines scrambled to reassure passengers. Governments reviewed tracking systems, questioning how a massive aircraft could simply vanish without a trace. The tragedy exposed glaring flaws in international aviation safety. No real-time global tracking of flights, reliance on outdated radar, and poor communication between nations. The disappearance of MH370 also revealed something deeper about human psychology. When faced with an unexplained event, people crave answers. In the vacuum of certainty, conspiracy theories flourished. Some claimed the plane had been hijacked and flown to a secret military base. Others insisted it had been shot down by accident, covered up by governments. Online forums buzzed with speculation, some logical, others bizarre. But for the families, these theories were often cruel. Each new rumor raised hopes only to dash them again. One wife of a passenger said bitterly, "They say my husband is alive, trapped somewhere. Do they not know how this tortures me?" The longer the mystery dragged on, the more it became part of global culture. Documentaries, books, even fictional films drew inspiration from MH370. But unlike a movie, there was no ending, no final revelation. Only an open wound. For the relatives, closure remained elusive. Some continued to gather on anniversaries, holding vigils with candles and photographs. Others traveled to the shores where debris was found, throwing flowers into the sea as a final farewell. Yet many still refused to give up hope, believing their loved ones might one day return. MH370 was no longer just a missing airplane. It was a symbol of loss, of unanswered questions, and of humanity's limits in the face of nature's vastness. Years after the disappearance of MH370, its shadow still lingers. The mystery has not only left scars on the families of the victims, but also reshaped the aviation industry and global awareness of safety in the skies. One of the most immediate legacies was the urgent call for real-time flight tracking. No longer could the world accept that a modern aircraft, carrying hundreds of lives, could simply vanish off radar. The International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, introduced new standards requiring airlines to report their aircraft positions at regular intervals. Some companies adopted satellite-based tracking systems capable of monitoring planes in real time, no matter how remote the skies. Another legacy was the technological push in undersea exploration. The search for MH370 mapped thousands of square miles of the Indian Ocean seabed, revealing mountains, ridges, and shipwrecks that had remained hidden for centuries. Ironically, though the search did not yield the missing plane, it expanded humanity's knowledge of one of the least explored parts of Earth. For investigators, The lessons were both practical and painful. They learned how fragile the chain of communication can be between nations during an aviation crisis. Jurisdiction disputes, poor information sharing, and delays plagued the MH370 case. Today, protocols are tighter, and collaboration between international agencies has become more urgent. Yet, despite these improvements, MH370 itself remains unsolved. The central questions still hang in the air. Where did it go? Why did it turn off course? Was it deliberate, accidental, or something else entirely? Some new investigations have kept the mystery alive. Independent researchers continue to analyze ocean drift models, hoping to pinpoint where the main wreckage may rest. Private companies have launched their own search efforts, confident that the answer lies hidden in the abyss. Each time hopes rise, and each time the ocean gives nothing back. For the families, every passing year is both a reminder of loss and a refusal to forget. Some demand that the search resume, arguing that no cost should outweigh the dignity of closure. Others try to move forward, but admit the mystery will forever haunt them. And for the world at large, MH370 has become more than a tragedy. It is a symbol of human vulnerability in an age where technology feels invincible, a symbol of the limits of science when confronted with the vastness of nature, and a symbol of mystery itself, a reminder that even in the 21st century, some truths remain hidden. The disappearance of Flight MH370 is not just the story of a plane that vanished. It is a mirror held up to humanity, showing our hunger for answers, our fear of uncertainty, and our inability to let go of the unexplained. Until the wreckage is found, until the black boxes speak, the story of MH370 will remain unfinished. And perhaps that is what makes it so haunting. And so we reach the end of tonight's story. Yet the mystery of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 is far from over. A plane, 239 souls, and an ocean of unanswered questions. In an age of satellites, radars, and advanced technology, how could something so large vanish without a trace? Perhaps one day, the waves of the Indian Ocean will surrender their secret. Perhaps the black boxes still rest in silence, waiting to reveal what truly happened in those final hours. Until then, MH370 remains one of the greatest mysteries of our time. A haunting reminder that even in the modern world, there are places where the truth can hide forever. You've been listening to Mystery Story, where we bring you the world's most chilling unsolved cases, legends, and histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, so you never miss the next story waiting in the shadows. This is Mystery Story. Thank you for joining us tonight. And remember, some mysteries were never meant to be solved.